On the SportsMax Zone, we're going to talk some football now. As the business of football continues to command huge sums of money globally, the demand for players from the Caribbean is likely to increase. While recalling their experiences overseas, footballers from the region often speak of having to overcome the stigma of being labelled lazy and indisciplined. However, what more can be done within the Caribbean Football Union to further prepare players for export to Europe and North America? Goko Palmer is a football agent with the UK-based Kimberlite Sports Group, and he's about to shed some light now on preparing footballers from the region for professional contracts overseas. He's also the agent for Fulham's recent Reggae Boy invitee Delano McCoy-Splatt. Goko, welcome to the SportsMax Zone. Great to have you on the show. It's an issue that we've discussed a lot here on the SportsMax Zone, with Caribbean players getting overseas opportunities and finding difficulty in finding their feet and getting comfortable enough to put their all into the situations with the culture shock and the differences in lifestyle and quite often climate and temperatures and so on. Great to have you on the show to discuss this, as you represent a lot of players who are outside of Europe and North America. What would be the first thing, as from your standpoint, in pointing a teenager to the main points of grabbing an overseas opportunity when they go on trial?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I think, let's take it back for a second. You mentioned, players having issues of adapting culturally because you're coming from one country to another, but then also in terms of coaching styles as well. I think if you're a young player and you're going out on trial and you're from Jamaica or the Caribbean, typically you're probably in the international setups, and that's where clubs in Europe and other countries as well will start to look at you, typically. And if you're going out on a trial, literally all you have to be able to do is go out, deliver who you are as a person, show them that you're hungry and that you're willing to learn. I think that when I look at, say, what's going on in Jamaica in terms of the CONCACAF Under-20s last year, and I'm looking at young players coming through there, there's almost, I guess, a bit of a vacuum, for coaching locally. I don't think the coach education has been quite the same as what we have here, in Europe, where we have a lot of programs that need to wait for a license, programs to even be able to be an academy coach out here. So things are very different. So I think that needs to be changed for you guys as well. So it's hard to just put it all on the players. I think better infrastructure needs to be built out first. But typically, I think if you're going out on trial, literally it's just coming out here, having a great attitude, working, understanding, learning, and ask good questions. Ask, what more would you want to see of me, Gaffer? What do you want to see from a player of my type of position or the type of profile that I've got? Maybe even ask them, what did you see in me that you made me want to come over here? And then try and better understand what they're looking for. That's always a good way of being able to do that. And also fitting in culturally, with the lads as well, being part of a dressing room, even though you're a trialist, being able to get on with other players. That's massively important as well, because if everything goes well, these guys are meant to be your teammates. Now, can you gel with that group and perform? That's also going to be something that these coaches look for.
Yeah. Another side of the coin is the aspect of eligibility and work permits. Can you speak to the changes over the decades in how these things operate? Because when Aston Villa went for Dwight York decades ago, and Russell Latterby got his opportunity in Portugal, and maybe Ricardo Bibi Gardner coming from Jamaica to Bolton Wanderers in England, I'm not sure if the landscape then is as it is now. Is there any difference between what happened in the 80s and 90s to what we are seeing now?
I won't go too far into it. I won't comment on certain things that happened in the 80s and 90s, but things have certainly changed, and there are differences. So out here in England in particular, we've got a point system. You have that in Scotland as well. And part of the point system for you to be able to obtain a work permit is how many international games have you played. If you're a younger player, say if you're like 16, they're not going to really expect you to be a first team international, but they'll expect you to be playing up, the age groups, so maybe under 18s or under 20s. Whereas if you're a young player, like say Tariq Zimenez, who was 17 and made his Jamaica first team debut, they look at things like that. If you look at nations such as Belgium, things are a little bit different. They're a little bit more lax when it comes to the work permit situation. They'll bring players over as long as the club are willing to pay the minimum wage out there. But then there are other places like Holland. It'll be a little more difficult where you have to be an EU citizen. So that might be more of a challenge, whereas if you've got maybe a family member abroad, or your family happen to be economic migrants because your family have moved, from one country to another to find work, that's another way that you can kind of get into the system out here. It's a big risk, though, because literally your whole family are moving. And if you look at, say, some of the Scandinavian nations, they can be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to the work permit situation. But typically, if you want to be in England or in Scotland, you've got to be of a top 50 ranked FIFA nation. So Jamaica probably on the way there, so it's a stronger space to be in. Right now, if you're from Trinidad and Tobago, it'll be a little more difficult. They've got some quality players, of course, such as Michel Pounangerin and Kylie Ovray. But Kylie, obviously, is French because he's born and raised in France. Players from Trinidad and Tobago might have a harder time because they're ranked in the top hundreds, whereas Jamaica, I think it was 63 or 64 in the FIFA rankings.
Yes, at the moment. Outside of the top 50, about 62 or so. Yeah.
But not too far out. And if we're looking at what the coaching staff are now doing, the extra internationals, playing good quality internationals, if you're winning those games as well, those friendlies, it then counts towards your FIFA ranking. If they have a good Gold Cup, that can also help lift Jamaica's ranking. So the next few years, if you're a young Jamaican playing, you should have hopefully a bit of positivity around what's going on in Jamaica, but also with the national team set up and their ranking, because it should improve.
Right. In sport, we always hear about players having an agent. But unless you have an agent, you never really understand what exactly is the role of the agent. Can you share with us, some of the duties that you have to the players and, what makes you as an agent different from other agencies?
Well, I think the role of an agent, as I said, there's a lot around it in terms of people have different views on it. I can't comment on how other agencies see things. There are agents who broker business, so they'll be between selling club and buying club, and they'll be helping to make the transfer. And then you have those who represent the talent as well, so players, people who look after players and coaches and managers. So what we would typically do is just try and help the player wherever they need help, whether that be helping them with, like, say, a boot deal with an Adidas, or whether that be just going to games, giving feedback, helping them get extra one-on-one sessions with good coaches out here. That's an extra thing as well. Just being able to give honest advice about situations that players may be facing, helping train them so when they arrive in certain parts of their career, they're already ready because they know you've already spoken to them about what they should expect at that level. So if you're going from, say, 18s football to 21s football, the difference in intensity, you're going to have more scouts there, from clubs, talking about loan moves, how loan moves might help in terms of your personal development as a player. Keeping in touch with the club that you're at as well, and actually having a half-decent relationship with them to ensure that what's going on in terms of your personal development plan is stuck to as a player. And when you've got injuries, just being there, sometimes being on the end of the phone, having a conversation, maybe popping around, trying to lift spirits, because it's a very lonely time when players have injuries. So there's so many different things that go on. For me, I wouldn't want to say there's a massive difference between me and them because I don't want to come across to be negative towards others. I think for me, I have a personal touch. I've been in the game at some big agencies previously and been around some big players and seen them go from youth players to being leading international players, guys who've even played for England and had multiple caps, and being quite, big profiles out here. And I've seen that and been able to pass that on to young players and say, well, actually, you might be going through this, but someone else had a similar situation like that. And just helping them navigate how their career is meant to be and also how they're meant to be professionals. Because when you get into under-18s football and you sign your first pro, the club now, even if you're 17 years old, expect you to handle yourself as a professional, even though you might not be in the first team. There's certain things that are expected of you, and someone has to have that conversation with you and help lead you down that way of doing things. But also being able to understand what is a relevant thing for you to be able to speak to the club about at any point, how you have those conversations, how you navigate working with your coaches. There's loads of stuff, and there's lots of stuff we're involved in, and I guess it's more the personal touch and understanding the player and what their personal needs are.
Yeah, Goku, you just said certain things are expected of you. Can you highlight some of what you're talking about specifically?
Yeah. So say if you're a young player in the academies and you're under 16, you're not really going to be in a position where you can talk too much, if that makes sense, because you're a young kid. And that's what they see you as. By the time you're signing your first pro, if you need extra physio sessions, or you feel that your diet needs tweaking because you have your nutritional plan, but you're physically still growing and you're taking on more weight, so you feel that there needs to be tweaks, you need to be having that conversation, and you need to be a little bit more, I guess, proactive about having those conversations. And it can't come from your agent, it has to come from you as a player. And it's like, how do you have that conversation? How do you make sure that you get what you need? Maybe you need some more help with the tech guys who are clipping down your games, or you want to study a different player and you want some extra clips or some extra support. When you become a pro, you need to have those conversations for yourself. And it's just letting players know that there's actually a big difference, and there's so many facilities and resources that these clubs have. Are you best using them? How to go about having those conversations and seeing what you are able to have, really.
Yeah, and speaking about video footage and all these different things, do you feel the proliferation of social media has assisted in your job? It has allowed you to get more clients. It has also assisted the players.
It hasn't helped me get more clients, sadly. I've made the choice to have a private Instagram profile, so I've never really utilised it to go and essentially approach players. For me, I particularly like the old school way of actually going to games, seeing what's going on, connecting with players, connecting with families, having a conversation, getting to see if there's actually a mutual fit for both parties. In terms of for players, there was, I guess, probably about 10 years ago where some players were getting signed off with no YouTube clips, and clubs realised that wasn't the way forward because anyone could look good in clips. So not really, not right now. I don't think it's helped massively in terms of people getting placed. It's more going back towards the traditional side of things. Are you playing international football? Because typically the view would be, if you're one of the best players in the country, you'll be playing for the national team. So yeah, I think for players, it's more going back down the old school route of things. I guess video analysis helps in terms of platforms like Y-Scout, because clubs can look at things and watch games that they might not have someone physically being on the ground for. And it also helps them, with the data. So if we look at certain clubs in England, Brighton being one of them, they're very big on using data, so they'll use a lot of video feeds from platforms such as Y-Scout. That's not really social media.
Goku, great talking to you here. You have opened our eyes to a lot of things. I think it's a discussion that we can continue to have here on the SportsMax Zone, because football is the most popular sport. I know when people think about the Caribbean, they think about cricket, Goku, but football is definitely a bigger sport in the Caribbean than cricket is. So I think there is room for us to have more discussions like this. But thanks for talking to us.
You're welcome. No problem. Take care, guys. Have a great one.
Yeah, man. Great. Yeah, great talking to Goku there, Mariah, because there are a lot of things that our young players who aspire to be professional footballers need to know about the game and need to know about the opportunities that are out there for them.
But that's why I posed that question, because we always hear the word agent. We know that professional players have agents, but you never really understand unless you have an agent. So I felt like it was necessary that, we educate, because every day we all learn different things. Even I, as Darren Sammy said in his interview, we're all a work in progress. So I think this was a very, very important discussion, and as you said, we continue. Well, as we go to the break, a new episode of In Case You Missed It airs tomorrow. That's Saturday at 9 in the morning, 10 ECT on SportsMax.tv and on our YouTube platform. You can catch my conversation with St. Lucian sprinter Naomi London. She won silver in both the under-17 girls 100 and 200 meter event at the 50th Caribbean Games in the Bahamas. This is St. Lucia's first ever sprint medal. Here's a snippet. When you got back home, back to St. Lucia, and St. Lucia is very pretty. I had the opportunity to visit, and of course I love it. What was the reception like when you got home?
Oh my gosh, a lot of celebration happened. I mean, when I got home, everybody was around and just cheering Naomi London, Naomi London. It was just a bunch of support. I mean, I love the fact that, my community supports me no matter what I do.